Former President Jacob Zuma has until the 9th of April to challenge the Electoral Commission's decision to bar him from contesting a parliamentary seat after the 29th of May general elections. Now, the Electoral Commission Act states that any persons convicted of an offence and sentenced to more than 12 months imprisonment without the option of a fine is disqualified from standing for elections. In July of 2021, the 81-year-old was sentenced to a 15-month prison sentence for contempt of court without the option of a fine. Umkhonto Wesizwe says its de facto leader will be in parliament even if it means the constitution has to be amended. For more on this discussion, we're now joined by political analyst Thobani Zikalala. Zikalala, thank you so much for your time and for joining us this evening. So the IEC has disqualified former President Jacob Zuma from running for the 29th of May election on behalf of the MK party. Surely President Zuma could have perhaps anticipated this move?
Nomdai, good evening and good evening to your viewers. I think, of course, I will agree with you. I think the move by the IEC in terms of the upholding of the objections that have been put forward on the former President Jacob Zuma, I think they must have been anticipated because they are a prescripts of legislation. It's what legislation prescribes on people who have been sentenced for more than 12 months. I think it must have been anticipated. But also, on the other hand, it must have been anticipated, but also the party may have anticipated and have put together a plan on how to avert such a situation. But on that because it would be a problem if the party did not anticipate what the legislation prescribes, because the legislation is very clear on what happens to those who have been sentenced to more than 12 months and within 5 years of the completion of such a sentence. Unfortunately, the president was released was released before the completion of that sentence, but also he has not finished 5 years, after the completion of such a sentence. So the law is very clear on that such people cannot be part of candidates or part of parliament as the composition of parliament so prescribed in the legislation. So I don't think it's a position that the MK party will not have anticipated. The only question that begs is that what plan do they have to be able to avert such a situation? Do they have a plan to be able to still put their voters at ease, but still make sure that they are able to leverage the popularity of the former president? Because having put him on the ballot, I think it was also to try and buy the goodwill of those who support him to be able to vote for the MK party. So if he's not on the ballot, how then do they then turn that around and be able to try and make sure that they leverage his popularity without him being on the ballot?
Of course. Now, the MK party has said that they would challenge this decision, and former IEC Commissioner Terry Tsilane has said they are well within their rights as a party. In your opinion, should South Africans anticipate political upheaval in the next coming 2 months leading to the elections?
I do not think so, because of course the law, the court of the country allows for the MK party to be able to challenge. The legislation allows for the MK party to be able to challenge such a decision. Of course, they may use other similar cases in the past to be able to try and challenge the decision. I don't think we must be so skeptical and be so negative that we believe that the MK party will resort to extrajudicial and extra legal means to be able to make sure that the president is in the ballot. I think they've shown in the past few weeks that they are well able to be able to challenge legal decisions and legal challenges in the court of law. We must, of course, trust in those who put themselves forward to be part of the legal political processes of being elected into parliament, that they are able to understand the responsibility that they carry to try and uphold such legislation. So we must not be so negative and so skeptical. Almost try to create a situation where the people of South Africa are so scared that there may be political upheaval. We are not a country that should be looking forward to any political upheaval, because we know that what has political violence and political contestation and resistance in the past have done to this country. I mean, we carry so much wounds, which I don't think there's anyone in this country who will just wish that. I mean, of course, it may be a consequence of political activity, but it's not something that anyone in this country would wish, understanding where we come from as a country.
Of course, of course. Now, Thobani, earlier on today, my colleague Hugo Ribotika spoke to Prof. Gidibone Phakwe, and he had this to say about President Zuma and the MK party. Let's take a listen.
He has been very chaotic, and the manner in which he has supported or not supported our public institution and has, contributed significantly in destroying many of those institutions still remains something that we need to address. And of course, if you look into the information, evidence that came out of the Zondo Commission on how our public institutions were paralyzed and that today are struggling to, just to function at a minimum, tells us about the intention or the nature of the MK party itself, that it is not going to be any different from the character of Jacob Zuma as a politician. So we need to be very careful, and I think IEC needs to be on the lookout to strengthen its own processes and make sure that they cover their backs as much as possible, but also be very solid in addressing these kind of threats. I would consider them as threats to our democracy.
So as you may have heard there, Thobani, he makes reference of the time that President Jacob Zuma was president and saying that many of the state-owned entities under President Jacob Zuma have fallen and the country is in disarray due to his leadership in that time. So in the greater scheme of things, what does President Jacob Zuma returning to politics in the way that he has mean for South Africa, given the history of his presidency?
I think where I would disagree with your previous guest is we must distinguish between a disrespect of institutions and a opposing of particular institutions in the decisions that they make or the political and economic outlook that they take in relation to where the country must go. Because the problem that we may have had is that sometimes politicians are judged for holding a opposing political view to what a particular institution may hold at a particular time. I mean, if President Jacob Zuma opposes the political angle and political position that the so-called Zondo Commission has taken, it may not mean him disregarding and disrespecting the institutions that have been placed. It may mean that he may have an opposing view to what that institution seeks to take to do at a particular time. And I think at that time we must also, at the same time that we uphold such institutions, we must also uphold the right of individuals to oppose such things. And because of that, the re-emergence or the reintroduction of Jacob Zuma into the mainstream political activity in this country may introduce that dynamic of a politician that may not disagree with the direction particular institutions are taking and particular prescript that we have held so dear as a country, and may have it within his right to try and challenge and maybe redirect where the country may go. We may disagree with those decisions, with those particular political outlooks, but it does not mean that we must oppose the rights of those politicians to hold such opposing views. I mean, we are a democracy of more than 30 years. I mean, we have matured to a position where we allow diverse views to be able to contend for public popular legitimacy and goodwill, and be able to allow such views to contend in the political space, and for the most superior view to be able to emerge out of that that popular contestation. We must not be a democracy that seeks to suggest that all of us are moving in the same direction, whereas there may be a section of our society that may not disagree. I mean, we have agreed with many other people who oppose the direction that we have taken, but it seems that we have allowed a particular public scrutiny on particular individuals not to be able to oppose and have a differing view on where we must go as a country. And I think we must uphold that right of every individual to be able to take such opposing views. Whilst, of course, we protect our institutions from those who disregard them, disrespect them, but we must also understand that sometimes an opposing view does not mean disrespect and disregard.
Right. So, Thobani, bringing back the conversation to the IEC barring former President Jacob Zuma in terms of him contesting a parliamentary seat. Now, a similar situation played out in 2009 when the Freedom Front Plus took on the ANC, who had listed the late Winnie Mandela as the 8th candidate on their parliamentary list. Now, the FF Plus citing that the ANC had contravened Section 47 of the Constitution in the same way that President Jacob Zuma has in this current situation, having been sentenced for more than 12 months. But this case in particular with Winnie Mandela was dismissed by the Electoral Commission and the courts. Can we make a comparison with the current situation with former President Zuma?
I think, Manomdai, we can make the comparison in as far as of the sentence being over 12 months. But also, I think if we read that judgment, it makes a distinction between a sentence of direct imprisonment with no option to fine and a sentence of more than 12 months with the suspended sentence. And it makes the distinction between the completion and the expiry of such a sentence. I mean, of course, I'm not a legal expert. I mean, legal people who may help you much more in terms of the understanding of that distinction. But I think in that time, the court was very clear on that the issue of the expiry and completion of sentence may be different. The issue of a wholly suspended sentence and a suspended sentence without a fine may be different. And that time, it upheld the decision of the IEC to allow Winnie Mandela to be able to contest for parliament on the basis that her sentence was a sentence that was wholly suspended for more than for 5 years. And in this case, you have a sentence of direct imprisonment, which is not suspended for 5 months, which is without the option of a fine, and the situations may be a bit different. But on both occasions, any party that feels that the IEC may have not taken a correct decision have within their own right to be able to challenge such a decision. But it will all rest on the basis of what is the prescript of the law. And the law is very clear on this regard. I think the way I understand it, the law says anyone who's been sentenced to direct imprisonment without an option of a fine for more than 12 months is not eligible to be a member of parliament if they've not completed 5 years, where they've not finished 5 years after the completion of such a sentence. And then in that regard, it's very clear of where the IEC stands today. But of course, its legal arguments may always be raised on whether or not the IEC has taken a correct decision here. And unfortunately, I may not be the most correct person to give such advice and such analysis because, of course, as I've said, I'm not a legal expert.
And I mean, maybe I could put another legal question to you, and I'm not sure if you'd be in the position to answer it. If then, does the presidential pardon excuse former President Jacob Zuma?
Of course, I think it offers a different dynamic that he's been given that sort of a pardon. He's been able to not copy, because again I'm not sure whether what was given to President Zuma is a presidential pardon in such a way that it says his sentence must be excused in whole, or does it say that he may be able to not complete his sentence in prison, but complete it outside. I mean, those are the different dynamics that you may have here, that he may not have been pardoned of the crime committed, that the court found that he had committed, but he may have been excused from completing the sentence in direct imprisonment. All these dynamics are dynamics that legal lawyers will be able to to raise it in court, should the MK be in a position to go and challenge that decision in court. And of course, the opposing lawyers will raise maybe similar arguments around the same court decisions. I mean, it's going to be, if it's taken to court, and that is a big if, because we don't know whether either part, the MK will take it to court. But if the MK takes it to court, it will make it for a very interesting case, especially in terms of our electoral laws going forward. The same way maybe Mam Winnie's case made for an interesting case that builds our jurisprudence going forward in understanding our electoral laws.
Lastly, in your opinion, Thobani, will the exclusion of President Zuma on that ballot have an impact on the MK party with regards to votes?
It may have an impact because, of course, the MK party has built its political message up to so far with the return of the former president into parliament to complete the work they believe he was well in course to complete of radical economic transformation. If you listen to the message and of their leaders and their supporters, it has always been about returning to parliament of President Jacob Zuma, the attainment of a two-thirds majority to complete the work of radical transformation that he has started. Now, if he is not able to return to parliament, how then it will depend on how then do they recraft their political message of him as the political leader of MK, and the MK being the engine upon which the completion of the work that he has started is going to be completed. I mean, how they craft that message, and of course within the phase that they choose to be the one that goes into the ballot and to be the one that goes to parliament, it will always depend on that. I mean, in politics sometimes we may try so much, or some of us will try to be very logical and reason and offer different analysis. But politics in South Africa, as we know it, is a very emotive game. And because of the emotive game, it will depend on whether or not the political party MK is able to craft a message that touches, using, of course, the image and popularity of President Jacob Zuma. It crafts a message that is able to touch on the emotions of the possible voter of the MK. And if they are able to do that, it may not have much of a political impact whether or not President Jacob Zuma is on the ballot.
Well, certainly emotions are going to be flaring up a lot more over the next 2 months. Zikalala, thank you so much for your time. It's always a pleasure to have you with us.